Hi, everybody. It's Dale Walsh, the Poetic Warriors and Mental Health Warriors, and thank you for joining me today. I've had like some technical difficulties recently, but hopefully that the platform will perform today. And I'm privileged and honored to have Tully Rose, who has a recent viral video that has 200 views, 2 million
2
views,
million.
and she uh, she specialty is relationships, and so we're going to be talking about toxic relationships and narcissism and how to get out of a toxic relationship, which is her specialty. And welcome, and let me just
Mm, I can't hear anything.
hi everybody.
There we go.
Can you hear me? There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, okay, well, because I'm the poetic warrior, I always start the show with a poem, and I have starting a new collection for 2023. It's my resolution to do a poem a day for the whole year. I did this in 2018, and I went 468 days with a poem a day. So it was basically a washout for my. That's why I've decided you promise to get productive. But this is the first poem of the new year, and it's called To Begin the Annual Cycle. In the glow of a New Year's Dale night, I bask in the warmth of the Lord's light, fighting for inspiration to create a masterpiece, even as I ponder my present lack of a mate, whom I know will be brought to me by fate. And as the world begins another year, I try to mature past all that I fear, growing like a rose in the midwinter snow, while seeking the sense of romantic liberation and looking for a lady of endless fascination. But I am certain the universe will provide the ideal woman ultimately to be by my side, though I might have to anticipate my next life, the celibate prison where I, knowing when she manifests, she'll be great. And so I trust in God, though it's often hard, but I know I'll be dealt the winning card to let me forget the decades of solitude I've spent composing in my little room, waiting to be fulfilled. So, how are you today?
I think we might be still having some connection issues. I think I heard you say, "How are you today?" So if that is what you said, then
I did.
doing okay, great. I'm doing well. Happy to be here, and yeah, excited to get started discussing.
Well, you're getting quite a reputation and quite a social media presence as a expert on toxic relationships and how to get out of them and how to deal with them if you're in one. But why don't we start by you began with talking about like personal borders and people pleasing and codependency. So why don't you like walk us through your evolution as a coach to where you are now?
Sure. It's kind of like a life story. So I will bullet point instead of, going into the whole thing. But, I grew up in an emotionally and physically abusive environment as a child. And that's where I really started to learn that my value came from what I did for other people. I also spent about a decade caregiving for my elderly grandparents, and really gave a lot of self away there, helping out when other family members didn't step up to the plate. I spent 14 years in the federal government working for Social Security Administration, as a public servant. So fitting for somebody who gives themselves away on a regular basis, right? Um, and I was miserable in that job. It was a high stress job. And in 2018, I decided to leave that career, even though I was making six figures, and start my own business, which didn't go well because I was in an abusive relationship. I got very distracted and it flopped. So I returned to work again for Stanford Healthcare, and which was an amazing experience because I got in right before the pandemic started. So I'm working for healthcare during a pandemic. It was a stressful but just like wow experience. But I was still not feeling fulfilled. So I got out of the toxic and abusive relationship, quit my job at Stanford in 2021, and started a business about people pleasing and codependency to help people who are struggling with it, who give so much of themselves away. So that was the focus of my business up until, I still talked about toxic relationships, but the main focus was people pleasing and codependency. But then on December 15th of 2022, the video about talking about toxic relationships, why it's so hard to walk away from them, went viral on TikTok. And within 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, I have, my calendar for consultations exploded. I've gained about 24,000 followers on TikTok. And the need for help with toxic relationships is now my main focus. So that's just a very short version of how I came to be where I am today.
Well, that's extremely interesting. How do you feel making that transition from like people pleasing and codependency to, I think people would say it was a much serious area of toxic relationships and domestic violence and abuse and everything.
Yeah, so there's a lot of overlap with people pleasing, codependency, and toxic relationships. I'm not necessarily saying people pleasing, codependency, and domestic violence are always intertwined, but it's definitely possible. But toxic relationships in general, there is usually an aspect of people pleasing or codependency because the person who's being victimized is giving a lot of themselves away. They're self-sacrificing. They're becoming very focused on the partner and way less focused on themselves, which is, a symptom of codependency. So it's, it has been an overwhelming transition at times, just because instead of just talking about people who are doing too much for others, now the focus is talking about people's stories of abuse, how to get out of a violent relationship. Sometimes these are life-threatening situations. The most dangerous time for a victim to leave, I'm sorry, the most dangerous time for a domestic abuse victim is when they leave the relationship. So, those 2020 murder documentaries that we see, a lot of them involve domestic violence, and a lot of them happen after the person tries to leave the relationship. So yes, it is the topic matter is extremely serious. And in terms of how I'm handling the transition is, just trying to focus more on caring for my own energy and guarding my energy, having boundaries, right? So that's what it's been like, and what I'm working on right now is just really being able to have those healthy boundaries between myself and others.
Well, that gets back to your roots. That was basically how you started, is
Yeah.
talking about boundaries, right?
Yep. Absolutely. I mean, and they still matter with domestic violence. I mean, even more so with toxic relationships. So, yes.
Right.
So, continuing to talk about that.
Well, I, I think a lot other people have trouble with boundaries. I know I do, and
Yeah.
part of it is people pleasing, but also just like people are afraid to stand up for themselves. I mean, this is like part of the domestic violence and abuse and everything, but people are afraid to like really like define their boundaries, and I've been getting a lot better at it, but it's a process.
Good.
Could you talk about that a little bit? How you go about doing that?
Sure, sure, absolutely. So the in order to be able to discover what our boundaries are and well, okay, let me back up. So in order to be able to set and enforce boundaries, you have to know what your boundaries are. And in order to know what your boundaries are, then you need to know what is most important to you in this world. So in other words, getting to know your core values. So if one of your core values is trustworthiness, right? So that means that you value, not only do you value whether, the people around you need to be trustworthy, but you also value being able to trust yourself. So when we put ourselves in situations where we're in toxic relationships, we can't trust them. And then we can't trust ourselves to make decisions that are in our best interest. So when we go into conflict with our values, we suffer every time. So in order to know what boundaries to set, that's an individual thing for every person. So you have to be able to get to know your core values, get to know what is most important to you in this world, because then you can know what is a violation of what's most important to you in this world look like. And then that's where your boundary is.
That you bring up values and how essential values are to boundaries, but I think that's like one of the problems or one of the curses of the modern world that we live in, is that people never take time to examine what their values are. So therefore, they get drawn into situations that might be against their values, but they don't really know it because they don't know what their values are in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this isn't something that's taught in school. It's not something that we're even really encouraged to embrace as a society. There's so many messes out there, just think about advertising, right? Advertisers don't want you to think for yourself. They want you to buy their product. So the messaging is going to try to influence you to make a decision that is not really on your best behalf, but that puts money in their pocket. So we're talking about, clothing, accessories, supplements, um, think about plastic surgery. There is a message that, you know, you aren't the ideal version of beauty, but don't you worry, because we can fix that for you and make you the ideal version of beauty, instead of you sitting back and reflecting on what it is that really satisfies you. We have so many messages coming at us that are telling us who we should be, instead of us taking the time to reflect. So I personally think it's a radical act of rebellion to be able to stop the noise, take a moment, and reflect and get to know what's most important to you, rather than listening to all the messages of telling you what should be most important to you.
Right. But that brings this is something that was sort of stirred up. But when
Yeah.
talking about people pleasing, and when a people pleaser runs into a narcissist, and it's like what my old shrink called the folie à deux, which is like each other's pathology, uh, like reinforces the others. So the people pleaser wants to please the narcissist and the narcissist just wants to, please himself, him, say,
Yeah.
and that makes it like a very volatile combination that helps explain why it's so hard to get out of a toxic relationship, especially the longer it goes on, right?
Yes, absolutely. And the thing that can be mind blowing for, especially for my audience and my clients to learn, is that those of us who are people pleasers, codependents, or even people who call themselves empaths, they're really just empaths, people pleasers, and codependents and narcissists are two sides of the same coin. And what I mean by that is that both of them are really don't do a great job of self-regulating. So both are not really great at regulating their own emotions. They look externally for other people to do that for them. So when they meet each other, both of them are so the narcissistic person is looking for someone else to validate them externally and give them stuff, right? That's where they're because they are not able to regulate their own emotions. They need external people to do that. And then a people pleaser, codependent, or empath has the same problem, but they just cope with it in different ways. One, like you said, copes with not being able to self regulate by giving themselves away. And then the other self regulates by taking from others. So, yes, it's kind of like the perfect storm when they meet each other.
Well, that's what I was saying. Their pathologies like reinforce each other.
Yes. Yes.
So, let's well, thank you have it. I know that you're coaching from personal experience. I don't want to like like go into something that is too sensitive, but could could you just like give us like a thumbnail history of like your relationship that got you into this?
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
I know it's very.
Very tumultuous. Yeah. So
Well,
absolutely. Yeah. I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem talking about that. That like my stance is I'm never going to reveal his identity or anything of that sort. But, I don't mind talking about the details. So, you know, what got me into this relationship, and I think it's important for everyone finding themselves in a toxic relationship to reflect on this is when I got into the relationship, I was at a point in my life where I had just recently left Social Security Administration. So I had just quit my job, and I quit my job because I got to a point of burnout. I had recently been diagnosed with PTSD. Um, I was, trying to care for my grandparents while also dealing with mental health issues. I was back living at my grandparents' house. So, I wasn't in the best place in my life. Um, so when I met him, he was also living at his parents' house because he had recently split up from his wife. And so like we were kind of both in this situation where we were just like, wow, we're like in our 30s and our lives are kind of falling apart. And then, that was very easy for me to ignore some of the red flags because I just felt like, well, I can't judge him when I look at the situation I'm in, right? So that is very important to pay attention to. What was your life like when you met this person that became toxic to you? What was your mindset like? What were you feeling inside? And all of those things matter. So it sort of set me up to be a lot easier of a target at that point. So it was a very kind of whirlwind sort of romance. It was easy to move very move quickly because I knew this person since we were kids. It was a childhood friend. So that's another red flag to pay attention to is if somebody wants to move really fast. Like they're telling you they love you fast. They want to move in fast, move in together fast, or get married fast, or have babies fast. Like that is a red flag. Why is this person wanting that from you when they really don't know you? It doesn't, you sometimes when we have low self-esteem, we equate that with, oh my God, they must think I'm so special. But you know what? Really, we're all special, but how can this person legitimately want those things from you when they don't know you? So please pause when, anytime somebody is trying to push the relationship quick. So it moved really fast. We were talking about, he was asking me to move in within 3 months of being together. But right before we were going to move in, he surprised me with a drug relapse that I didn't even really know was a problem. And didn't tell me the truth about it. I had to take him to the hospital. And only once we got to the hospital did I know that he had taken fentanyl and was withdrawing very intensely from it. So that was the first huge red flag that really, when I look in the past, I'm not going to beat myself up for it, but I really should have walked away then. Because I'm getting the sign like this person has a serious drug problem. They're not going to be honest with me about it. And now I'm dealing with this life-threatening situation. But I somehow, because of the intensity of the relationship, I pushed forward moving in anyway. So moved in anyway, became a disaster, to make the story shorter. Like we lived together for a few months, and it was filled with very intense fighting, a lot of anger on his part that was frightening to me. Not he did not hit me, but he broke things and threw things and said extremely cruel things that were told to him in confidence and secrecy, but he would use that information and weaponize it against me when angry with me. There was just like a lot of mismanagement with money. I lost thousands of dollars because of drug habit and just being very irresponsible. It was kind of like I went into the relationship and I was more of a babysitter than a partner. So, fast forward like 4 years, 4 years of back and forth. I left the relationship probably 12 times. I would say it might even be more, but you start to lose count. He threatened my life when I left, threatened my family's life. He threatened suicide, which is a common manipulative tactic of abusers. And it's not something that I don't take seriously, but it is a coercive control tactic to threaten your life in response to a partner not liking something that you're doing or leaving you. He posted intimate things about me on social media that were humiliating in response to me leaving. So it was quite a lot. Uh, so I'm sort of losing what your initial question was, but that is the story. That is the story of what happened, and
Well,
you know, yeah. So it just
well, I was so that this is like the classic scene, the classic case we're talking about, where you as a people pleaser, when it got involved with a narcissistic drug.
yes,
Now you say you lost thousands of dollars.
yeah.
You say you lost thousands of dollars to his drug habit. Did you know it was going to his drug habit, and you like gave it to him anyway, or?
No, so this is these kinds of things. When I say them out loud, it's kind of like, well, duh, but so this is another red flag to watch out for. If somebody doesn't have their own bank account, then there's something and they say they can't get one, then pay attention to that. So what I did, the super intelligent thing that I did was I opened a bank account in my name that was like for us. Thankfully, I kept like my money separate, like more of my money separate, but I opened an account with my name on it for us to, because he was contributing to the bills too. But what would happen is he would just spend money in large amounts. And, I wasn't always looking. And then sometimes it would just be like, what happened here? What are you spending money on? I don't know. Oh, I don't remember. I'm like, well, you're taking $300 out here, 300 there, 300 here, 300 there, thousands of dollars. And not only that, but the money that I spent of my own, just like fixing problems. I bought him a car because he totaled his car because he was driving high. And then, of course, did not treat that car well, damaged it. I had to pay for that too. So,
Right.
it's just, but when you're in it, it's so hard to see that this stuff is happening. But now that I'm not in it, saying it out loud is almost
Right.
like, duh. But it's really hard to see when you're in it.
Right. Well, one point I went to. You said you tried. It took you like 12 times before you actually like escaped the relationship, and
For good.
I know that's one of your main is that people. I just saw your reel last night about how people say, well, just leave and be mature and grow out of it and
Yeah.
everything. And could you like just talk about the difficulty of actually getting out of it? Well, before we do that, what is a toxic relationship, Tully Rose?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that, so there's like a general toxic relationship. So there's general, like if any relationship that you have with anyone, and I'm talking about a romantic partner, friend, family member, colleague, I don't care who it is, if it's not good for your well-being, that could be categorized as a toxic relationship. But the kind that I am talking about and the audience I am serving means that you are dealing with somebody who is taking you on a cycle of treating you well and then treating you badly and then treating you well and treating you badly. You're being manipulated, you're having your reality denied, you are maybe being subject to humiliation and verbal abuse. So that is what I'm talking about when I am talking about a toxic relationship.
And why don't you run us through the 4 steps of a toxic relationship? I know
Oh
you
yeah.
that's one of your major points.
Yes, absolutely. So when you say 4 steps of a toxic relationship, I know because you know my content that you're referring to the cycle of abuse, which is, if anyone watching this wants to just Google domestic violence cycle of abuse, then you will see this cycle. And the point that I'm making on social media is that when we're talking about narcissistic abuse, many times what we're really talking about is domestic violence. And the narcissistic abuse and domestic violence cycle are almost identical, if not identical. So the stages, there's 4 stages. The first stage is the ad so I might not be using the exact words because I just frankly don't remember, but it would be the agitation stage, which means that you can tell that this person is irritable. You know that the explosion, whatever it is, the abusive behavior is coming. You just don't know when. And then we have the incident, which would be the second stage of the cycle, which would be the abusive incident itself has occurred, which is the verbal abuse, the lying or deception, the betrayal, the silent treatment, the gaslighting, the manipulation. And then we have the reconciliation period, which for those that are familiar with narcissistic abuse will also call love bombing. Excuse me, love bombing. So that means that the person is now, you know, um, making it up to you. They're so sweet and loving and they're sorry and they're never going to do it again and they're making promises and they're being romantic after treating you terribly. Right? So and then that's the third stage, which is reconciliation. The fourth is calm. That means that the abuse has occurred, the reconciliation has occurred, and now it's just a period of calm where everything seems okay. It seems like, everything's normal now. But with these relationships, it inevitably starts all over again, where you notice that they're getting irritable, they're getting agitated, you start feeling that anxiety of, oh my God, here we go again. I know it's coming. I just don't know when or what it's going to be this time. And it starts all over again and repeats again and again. So when I'm talking about toxic relationships, I'm mainly talking to an audience who is experiencing the domestic violence cycle of abuse.
So, I question, but what's the difference between like a toxic relationship event or incident and just like question of great it could be triggered by things and that like just part of this book. I don't know if I'm being clear.
Yeah, you're being clear. So I think what you're asking is like, how do you know the difference between something that is considered like highly toxic or abusive and just something like, somebody's having a bad day, right? So I think that the
Right.
way to be able, yeah, the way to be able to tell is does it go in cycles? Is this a regular pattern of the relationship, or is this just something like this is just like an occasional bad day? Another way to tell is to really think about the relationship in terms of, do you feel like you're on a roller coaster? Are the highs really high and then really low? Because healthy relationships stay more in like the middle space where there's little ups and downs, but it's not high and low. It's almost, to people who haven't had a healthy relationship before, it's almost boring. Love can be boring. It's neutral. It's just kind of like there's little ups and downs, but it's steady and it's consistent and it's reliable and it's secure. So if your relationship is a roller coaster and it's a pattern of them treating you badly and treating you well and treating you badly, treating you well, then that's the toxicity that I'm talking about.
Okay, well, thank you for clarification. And now let's get back to the question that I asked in the first place that
Sure.
prompted that is how difficult, and I mean, why is it so difficult to get out of a toxic relationship? You said it took you like 12 times even before you actually like finalized it. And, and
Mhm.
I've just heard people, ladies, especially women say, I would kept going back and everything. And so why is it so difficult to break that pattern or cycle of abuse when it's not good for you?
Right. Well, the first thing that I just want to comment on, and I know that this is something you wanted to make sure that we covered, was that, the comment that you made about especially women. So men go through this just as much. And it's just not something, I mean, I think that society is changing. I think that there's more talk from men coming out and publicly saying I was in an abusive relationship, but this is something that can affect anyone. Abusers can be women as well, and I have male clients, so I know firsthand that they can. And so just to make very clear, being in a toxic relationship or being abused can happen to anyone, regardless of your age, your gender, how much money you make, what industry you're in, um, your sexual orientation. It can touch anyone at any time. So I wanted to make that distinction. But to answer your question of why it's so hard to leave these relationships is sort of going back to something I've already talked about, which is the cycle of abuse. Which is also called intermittent reinforcement, which means that sometimes you're rewarded and sometimes you're punished, and you don't know which one is coming when. So it's very confusing for the brain to hold two ideas of a person. Is this person a good person, or is this person a bad person? Because sometimes they treat me really well, but sometimes they treat me really bad. And when I say really bad, I mean, in a lot of instances, these people, victims of this type of abuse, this person treats them worse than anyone has ever in their life. I mean, how often, like, your friends don't threaten your life, right? Like, your friends don't publicly humiliate you or verbally annihilate you, right? But this person does. But then they turn around and they tell you how much they love you. They tell you that you're their soulmate. They tell you that they couldn't possibly live without you. They don't want anybody else. But then they turn around and stab you in the back. But they also come and sew up the wound at the same time. So they become both perpetrator and savior. So the very person that is hurting you is also the one that you now look to save you from the very pain they cause you. So that creates confusion in the brain and a psychological prison where you just don't, your brain can't wrap its mind around, like, how could this person who loves me so much and cares about me so much treat me with such cruelty? You can't wrap your mind around it, but your brain wants to figure it out. So sometimes just the wanting to know, do they really love me? Do they love me or not? I can't figure it out. My thing that I like to say on social media and also say to my clients is, if you're confused, that's a red flag. You don't need to be regularly confused about whether your partner cares about you. That's a very bad sign if you're confused. But that's why it's so hard to leave. Because if abusive people were abusive 100% of the time, then it wouldn't be a problem. You would just walk away. Why would you put up with that? But the problem with it is that abusive people are not abusive 100% of the time. They can be very nice and loving and caring and affectionate. But so that's where it comes in. That's the psychological prison.
One thing about the male female is I think that like males get like much more bad reputation in toxic relationships just because they can be physically violent more effectively than women can be. But
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't change the fact that you know maybe just as many toxic relationships are between where the woman is the abuser and the man is the victim. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing is it's hard to say what the statistics really are, because that would take all the victims to come forward, right? There's so many victims that don't say anything. There's
Right,
so
right.
many victims that don't come forward, that don't get help. So there's a lot of statistics that aren't verified out there. So, the thing is that there is some, I would say that okay, so if we look at statistics in terms of violence in the world, most violence in the world is committed by males. That's a fact. It is. But that doesn't
Right.
mean that women aren't also committing violence, and violence meaning verbal abuse, psychological abuse, and financial abuse. Um, so I mean, there's TV shows that are, I mean, like, I think one is called Snapped, like, where women are murdering their partners, like, so it does exist. um but
Right.
I think that, but the truth is that, and this is like the truth that I believe, is that especially physical violence, like, most violence is committed by males, and that I think that there is a societal influence on that, because of, and that's like definitely in the United States, that's a fault of ours, because we have really given the message either indirectly or directly that men shouldn't access softer parts of themselves. So what does that do? That creates a lot of like, so if you're a man and you're only allowed to be domineering and angry and aggressive, like, because those are acceptable emotions for men to have, right? So if those are the only acceptable emotions for you to
Right.
access, then you're going to be really angry because you're not allowed to feel sadness and hopelessness and heartbreak, and you have nowhere to turn in order to, you know, let those emotions out. So yeah, you're going to be really angry and probably really violent. So, that's just kind of a sidebar, that it just because there's some truth to that does not mean that women aren't also abusive. It might not be as much in the physical violence realm, but there are absolutely, there's some statistics that I've read that it's estimated that there is like as many male narcissists in the world, there's female narcissists. What does that mean? That means that women can be abusive too. Absolutely.
So so what can you tell us about narcissism and how it works into a toxic relation? I mean, we sort of covered this, but how
Yeah.
does what is a narcissist, and you know how can you like get involved with a narcissist? Because I know everybody says like narcissists are sometimes the most charming and like social
Yeah.
people, and it all like serves to further their agenda, but nonetheless it's very easy to be taken in by them, right? And that this
Absolutely.
is like male and female.
Correct. Absolutely. And so, something that is discussed often with my clients is that some of my clients say to me, I don't have any trauma in my childhood. I don't, there's no reason why I can pinpoint why I would fall a victim to this type of behavior because I had a very healthy upbringing. So that's why these relationships are I mean, they can affect anybody can be a victim of narcissistic and toxic abuse because of the fact that these people are so good at manipulating, so good at being charming. They can be absolutely great listeners and take a incredible interest in us, right? They can in the beginning they can be really in us. They will ask a lot of questions and seem very invested in getting to know us and to caring about what we care about by mirroring, right? So mirroring meaning they can pretend to be interested in what we're interested in, which can that kind of forms a bond with us, right? Like, oh my god, you're into that too, or you read books like that, or you like going hiking as much as I do, and when they may not even like that very much at all. But what they're doing is they're trying to break down any kind of barriers, and they want to get to know what's important to you. They want to know what makes you vulnerable because later on they're going to use that to their advantage. So that's the thing that I really like to emphasize is that these types know that what they're doing is wrong. They're not innocent. Yeah, they probably grew up with some trauma. Narcissism is characterized by growing up with a chaotic childhood and an abusive childhood, or a childhood where that person was treated like the golden child, meaning that they were treated like they were the best at everything and they never did anything wrong. So it's something like that, which in itself is a trauma. If you're treated like you never do anything wrong, then you have a very rude awakening when you enter the world and find out you can, in fact,
Right.
do things wrong, right? But what happens is with these types, they have at some point in their life collapsed their true self inside. They have decided that whoever they are is not okay. So instead of being able to take accountability, to reflect on themselves, to learn and grow, there's nothing there. It's almost like a complete void inside. So they look to other people to fill that void. So it's almost like, Dale, if you get involved with a narcissistic person, you're just like a toaster to them. You're an appliance. They use you. They don't really see you for who you are. You're an appliance. So what do you do with the toaster? When you set the toaster there, you plug it in when you want to use it, you put the toast in, you press the button, it gives you toast. Yay, you get what you want. But after that, you're done until you want toast again. You're treated like a commodity with these people. So, yes, they've probably had trauma in their past, but they're also aware that what they're doing is wrong, because you'll notice that they probably don't treat everyone as badly as they treat you. They won't speak to everyone the way they speak to you, which tells you that they know the difference between right and wrong. So that's really something that I like to point out, because it's very easy to try to feel sorry for them, especially if they tell you their sob stories of how they grew up or what's going on, their circumstances in life can get us really are pulling at our heartstrings and making us feel sorry for them, when in fact this is a tactic of manipulation. So they know the difference between right and wrong, and anybody, and I mean anybody, can become a victim of them.
Well, thank you very much for that. Narcissism is such a major topic in social media, and I don't
Yeah.
know whether it was because of Trump or whatever, but but this discussion or conversation has been exploding for about 3 or 4 years. But one thing, we're sort of getting near the end, but one thing I want to talk about, ask you about is you tell us about the. You told us about the cycle of domestic abuse, the four, tension, event, reconciliation, and calm. But this is something that we talked about, when we had the pre-show interview. Is talk about the pattern of people, the pattern that people follow, where they go from one relationship to another abusive relationship, and what advice or ideas, suggestions can you give to break that more bigger pattern of sequential toxic relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you notice yourself in a pattern, if you notice yourself going from one relationship to another that's similarly toxic, or maybe you notice that you keep recreating your childhood relationship with one of your parents with a relationship partner, then I think it's important to realize that your brain is in a pattern, and our brains love patterns. So, what distinguishes us from other animals is the fact that we have that frontal lobe. We're able to plan and think about the future and be logical. Other animals are not able to do that. They only respond from a primitive brain. So, but humans still have a primitive part of our brain. So that primitive part of the brain loves habits and grabs onto them, and will not let go very easily. So, what that means is, if your pattern is to be involved in relationships where it's very chaotic, where you don't feel like you're secure and you don't feel like you can trust a person, where you feel like you have to work hard for them to love you, that's a pattern in your brain. Your brain recognizes, oh, I remember this feeling of anxiety, this feeling of uncertainty, this feeling of insecurity with this person. This is familiar to me, and your brain is equating it with love. So love feels like chaos. Love feels like pain. So then your brain just, that's it. That's it. It's like, oh, this is familiar. This is it. This is what I'm doing. Now, obviously that's not conscious. It's not a conscious conversation you're having in your head, but just know that your brain loves any habit,
Right.
anything that you do over and over and over again, your brain loves it and will keep doing it and try to keep doing it no matter what. It does not know whether it's a bad habit. So, realizing that your brain is now familiar with chaos and pain equating to love, and to be able to get out of that pattern is to deal with the intense discomfort that will come from changing the patterns. If you try to change, even if you're doing things that would be in benefit to you, that primitive part of your brain is going to scream at you and ask you, what are you doing? No, we usually do this thing. We ruminate about them. We check their social media. We worry about the state of the relationship. That's what we do. Why are you trying to do something different? Don't you dare try to go to the gym instead. So, so just know that, when you're trying
Right.
to change a habit in the beginning, your brain is not going to like it at all, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do the thing that's right for you. So you have to be able to keep telling yourself that you're going to come up against resistance, and that's okay. You just need to keep doing the thing that's healthy for you until your brain accepts the new habit, until it becomes the new normal.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, talking about habits and brain and everything. The fact is that you have neural pathways that are etched in your brain, and those are the habit. They're etched by habit, and consequently, in order to like break out of that habit, not only do you have to like turn your back on the neural pathways that are there, but you have to work at building more positive, newer neural pathways to be able to combat the dark energy that you have.
Oh yeah, that's it. I mean, I couldn't,
And
that was
that
an
takes
excellent way.
self-awareness, which, and a lot of people, and the fact is that self-awareness is essential to like breaking patterns and being aware of patterns. But, sometimes maybe like blocks it and says, well, I'm not going to look at this pattern, or, because of the neural pathways. But
Yeah.
ultimately, self-awareness, I feel is like response is critical to not only recovery from like toxic relationships, but even mental illness, mental health problems. Self-awareness, I think, is like the key to total recovery.
I completely agree with you, and that's, just, like you and I have a great relationship. I think sometimes we have a similar, we think on a similar wavelength. So yes, absolutely. That is something that I tell my clients because they're so hard on themselves. Because they're not changing quickly, and it's, why am I still like this? And the most powerful part of healing is the awareness part. It's, you have to be able to be aware of what's happening and what is it. The fact that, a lot of them, I tell them, the fact that you have a name for it, that it's, the name is domestic violence, the name for it is trauma bonding, the name for it is whatever you want to call it, there's a name for it. And it doesn't have to stay this way. Now that you know what it is and you're aware that this is a problem for you in your life, then that gives you the power to do something different. Education and knowledge and awareness is power and will lead you to freedom.
Well, talking about the neural, I'm going off about the neural pathway a
Sure.
bit too much, perhaps. But the fact is that neural pathways are not only by actions, but also by thoughts and perceptions, and the habit of what you're perceiving and going through, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of changing those pathways is also, interrupting unhelpful thought patterns. Because when we think a particular thought, for example, if we think that I'll never find a healthy relationship, then what does that feel like? So if anyone's listening right now, do this exercise right now as you're listening to me talk. If you think the thought, I'll never find a healthy relationship, what is the strongest emotion that comes up for you when you think that thought? Just pick one emotion. What is the strongest emotion that comes up for you when you think that thought? So now that you've picked the emotion, I'm just going to use one as an example. So let's say the strongest emotion that comes up is anxiety when you think the thought, I'll never find a healthy relationship. So now you're feeling anxiety. What do you do when you feel that emotion? What do you do next? What are all the things that you do and all the things that you don't do? So think about that as I'm talking. I'll give an example to show you what I mean by that. So I think the thought, I'll never find a healthy relationship. I feel anxiety. And then what I do is I ruminate about the toxic person. I don't reach out for any support. I withdraw from my friends and family. I grab a bag of chips and, eat half of it. I cry. Yeah. So the list could go on. So what I do when I think that thought and feel anxiety is a lot of stuff that is not going to lead me to what I really want. Right. So then I think the thought, I feel the emotion, I do or don't do the things. And then what's my result? My result is, so the initial thought is I'll never find a healthy relationship. And then I do all these things. And then my result is I ensure that I don't have a healthy relationship with myself. That's the result. So that is part of the work to change those neural pathways that you mentioned, Dale, is to be very aware and make a change between. There's a quote that I love that talks about stimulus and response, right? So the stimulus could be the thought that is unhelpful, or maybe it's a text from the toxic person. It could be anything, right? So the stimulus is like the trigger. So in this case, we'll use the thought, right? The stimulus is, I'll never find a healthy relationship. So before you do anything, there's a pause in between stimulus and response. So the power that you're going to find is in the middle, in the pause. That's where you get to have a choice of what you're going to do differently. That's where you have a choice of choosing, processing the emotions that are coming from that thought instead of just reacting to them impulsively and stuffing your face with a bag of chips, for example. You have a choice. There's power in the pause. There's power in between stimulus and response. So yes, it is not just about the habits that I'm talking about, are also about creating new thought patterns and being able to pivot, not try to control what thoughts come into your mind, but rather just do something different than you have been doing when those thoughts arise.
That's a good place, I think, to end it. But I just want to say that one thing that is accepted by everybody is that the subconscious doesn't understand negative. So instead of saying I don't want to be broke, I'm going to be debt free.
Right.
And so
Absolutely.
you take out the no or the not, because when the subconscious, I don't want to be broke, it says it hears I am broke. But I really want to thank you for your insight and your enlightenment, and I'm looking forward to maybe having you again, and just
I'd love to.
thank you very much. And any parting thoughts that you want to lay on us?
I would just say that, knowledge is your power, and the awareness is your power, and you're not broken, you're not stupid, you're not naive, and you can heal.
Great. Well, if you'll stay on after we break, I'd like to do a little debrief. But thank you very much. And so let me tell you. So you can tell us people how they can reach you. So
Yeah.
in case they want to reach out to you.
Absolutely. So you can find me at my website, which is tullyrose.com. So if you're watching this and you see my name displayed here on the video, it's just my name, tullyrose.com. That's my website where you can find everything, every way to get a hold of me. You can also find me on pretty much every social channel, Facebook, TikTok, um, Instagram,
Instagram.
YouTube. Yeah. So a lot of them you can find me at the handle at I am Tallulah Rose. So at I am Tallulah Rose. You can also just go to my website and I have all my social links there at tullyrose.com.
And so could you spell Tallulah? Because I think some people are sort of overwhelmed by that.
Sure, absolutely. So the handle is at I am. So IAM is in Mary, and then Tallulah is T is in Tom, ALL, two L's, A. Oh my God. Let me start over. So Tallulah is T is in Tom, A is in Apple, two L's, U,
Tallu.
TALLULAH as in hat, Rose.
Okay, great. Well, we an hour. Just hang around and for your insights, and I really appreciate everything you said.
Thanks for having me, Dale.